welcome. I am really appreciative that you all are taking the time from your summer holidays, summer breaks that we know were so well deserved, in particular this year, to join us for our Library of Congress Teaching with Primary Sources workshop, Art Forms of Resistance. We have a wonderful 3 days planned for you all, and are just going to start. So I'm going to begin by introducing myself, and then let my colleagues introduce themselves. I'm Nicole Gilbertson. I'm the director of the UC Irvine History Project and the UC Irvine Teacher Academy, and I'm so excited to be able to partner with my wonderful colleagues today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Wong, and I'm a program coordinator with the UC Irvine History Project. I'm happy to have all of you here today.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Danny Diaz. I'm the director of the UCLA History Geography Project. I'm really excited about this upcoming series, and I'm excited also to be with you all today.
I am Amparo Chavez Gonzalez. I am a member of the UCLA History and Geography Project team. I am a lead facilitator and a teacher coach, and I am really excited about learning and being in community with all of you.
And good morning, everyone. Cindy Mata with the UCLA History Project, and all the sentiments shared. I'm so excited to be learning alongside y'all for the next few days.
All right. Thanks, everybody. So Danny dropped a sign-in. If you all could please just take a quick minute to sign in, let us know your name and also your congressional district and or zip code, because we need to share who has participated in this workshop with our Library of Congress partners and their and the Congress, who also is interested in knowing who we're serving. So I want to start by acknowledging the land of University of California is located on the land of the Ahashiman and Tongva peoples, who have continuously occupied the area for the last 8,000 years. The Ahashiman and Tongva nations continue to claim their place in their traditional territory. And I welcome you all to let us know where you are working or living on right now, whose traditional lands. I heard already that I think it's Susanna says she's coming from Arizona. So maybe that is your home and you know whose traditional lands they are, but maybe you might want to learn a little bit more about that. And if that's the case, any of you can take a visit to the nativeland.ca, and that will provide you with information about either the Indigenous people where you're currently reside or where you're traveling to, or any place really in the world. It's a really amazing resource. So I'm just going to pause and let people share where they're coming from today.
You'll find that link in the chat along with another resource for you to think about land acknowledgements.
All right, I see we have a few people from the Tongva land in Los Angeles. So I'm going to, while folks are writing in the chat, I'm going to share the goals of the TPS, which is Teaching with Primary Sources workshop. We have these 4 goals for us. Thanks for sharing, everybody. The first is the overarching goal is for us to gain strategies for using primary sources to help students engage in learning, develop critical thinking skills, and build content knowledge. And I believe that we asked folks to take a look at the videos around the Library of Congress and primary sources. So you got a little bit of a sense of the many amazing resources on the Library of Congress, and we'll really try to dig into that the next few days, in addition to many other primary sources really focused in on art, and how we might be able to integrate that into our classrooms. So we're going to talk about the inquiry process, analyzing primary sources, give you opportunities to explore the Library of Congress website, and then finalize our work together by creating an inquiry activity with primary sources from the library. We have 2 guiding questions for our work together. One is how does resistant art help tell the story of communities? And then the second is how can we use the resources from the Library of Congress to develop an inquiry-based lesson? And if we could drop the agenda into the chat, that would be great. Just to give everyone a bit of a preview of our work together today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Library of Congress, and we'll have an activity where we can share some art from our own communities. We then will have an opportunity to really dig into an primary source analysis of a piece of resistance art. Our focus for today is on murals and mural making, and we are lucky to be joined by Professor Alberto Pulido from University of San Diego, who's going to talk about Chicano Park, and then culminate the day in looking at some ways we might be able to integrate that into the classroom. Okay. So I just wanted to start with our introduction to the Library of Congress with this, a quick introduction to this exhibition that is linked in the agenda for you to visit independently and really be able to investigate further. It's called Art in Action. And the Library of Congress includes many works of art, interviews with the artists themselves, and exhibitions that highlight the important ways that artists have created opportunities for individuals and communities to take action to improve our society. The library's exhibition, Art in Action, highlights the ways that art sparks, and quote, according to them, powerful reflections on society's most urgent concerns that move viewers to think, feel, and sometimes take action. And that's really our focus today, is thinking about how art is inspiring people to not only think and feel, but really to move into community-based action. The artists featured highlight that they intend to begin a dialogue as reflected by Helen Zugabe in her exhibition item, Unfinished Journeys, which is pictured here. And here she memorializes Syrian refugees who drowned in 2015 while trying to reach the Greek island of Kos, by commemorating one victim, a small boy. Zugaib explains that she chose bright colors and patterns to express, quote, the beauty, hope, and optimism of a child. With these shoes, I'm hoping someone will try to imagine their own children in this situation. And artists in this exhibition want to shape and uplift memory to create and foster communities to develop empathy that moves people towards positive action. I want to share just a couple more images from this exhibition here. The collection Art in Action is inspired by Herbert L. Bloch, and his work is represented there on the left. He won 3 Pulitzer Prizes and became simply known as Herb Bloch. The exhibition highlights that during his 72-year career, he created editorial cartoons about life-changing events, controversial issues, and public figures. Many of his political cartoons are available on the Library of Congress. And his key themes have really established and inspired artists in the world of fine art that spark powerful reflections on society's most urgent concerns that move us to think, feel, and take action. So that's really the kind of big idea of this exhibition. And it's organized into different themes that we can use in our curriculum, such as civil rights, gender and women's issues, the environment, health, the impact of war, education, and the role of media. So the items selected highlight the collective nature of these movements, as exemplified by John Isaiah Pepion's drawing here on the right. It's made on an 1897 tax ledger sheet and shows activists Winona LaDuke and Faith Spotted Eagle holding signs that say, honor the earth and stop Keystone XL pipeline. According to the exhibition notes, Pepion, a member of Montana's Blackfeet Nation, carries forward the storytelling tradition of ledger art developed by Plains Indians artists in the 19th century, whereby artists use inventories as canvas, where they created artistic representations of historical or contemporary events. And so Pepion combines contemporary subject matter with the turn of the century practice that evolved, in which pages from the US government, accounting or ledger books were used for drawing paper. And he represents the resistance of the Keystone Pipeline as an example of art to communicate the ideas of the movement. expand that to broader audiences and contextualize this in a longer history of Native American resistance to economic exploitation at the cost of their communities, their land, and their future well-being. So this collection highlights the ways that the Library of Congress can support us as educators to share resistance art in the classroom as a mode of dialogue, storytelling, and inquiry-based instruction. And I thought that we could talk, or folks could unmute or just share in chat. If you want to let us know, how do you use art in the classroom? How do you use art to begin a dialogue, share stories, and support inquiry? Go ahead, Monica.
Hi, I like to use,
Morning.
good morning. I like to use political cartoons. I like to use propaganda posters. I like to use music from an era to kind of immerse my students in whatever historical era they're learning about. And I think as far as inquiry-based instruction, using, we use a lot of SHAG graphic organizers and things to analyze political cartoons and propaganda posters and things like that.
Thanks for sharing, Monica. I'm going to stop sharing right now because I see Sylvia is also going to share, and then we can have just a couple more minutes of dialogue about how we are using art already in the classroom. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Thanks. First of all, this is so totally exciting. We've been looking forward to this workshop now for a couple of weeks, so thank you for convening it. Secondly, I teach at an elementary school, UCLA Lab School, and we have used, hi Daniel and friends, we have used primary sources in all stages of the inquiry process, namely as provocations in the beginning to get kids thinking and wondering and developing questions about whatever the topic is. For instance, we often use comparisons. So I'll use a comparison that we have. It's the art of David Hockney, Mulholland Drive, which many of you may be familiar with, and a lot of his work about swimming pools and people who live in Beverly Hills, and contrasting that with another artist, Latino artist, I think it's Alberto Gomez, I may have the name incorrect, but he did a whole series of art in the style of David Hockney about all the people, the gardeners, the housekeepers, the nannies, all the people who support this lifestyle of Beverly Hills, who are very rarely recognized for it. So we often use those two together to get kids thinking about, okay, there's this Beverly Hills lifestyle, but who's really doing the work here and what are their lives like? So that's something that we often use.
Thanks, Sylvia. That sounds like a wonderful way to use art as an introduction and as that juxtaposition, right? To get really students thinking about when we're seeing what are we seeing, and then also what's included, and what gets included in some pieces and what's not included in other pieces, right? To kind of have that conversation with students. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Nancy, would you like to share with us? And I also see that Marcus said he also uses art as an inquiry-based opener. Thanks for sharing that.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I also use that graphic organizer. Someone asked earlier, particular strategy, where we'll take different art. I usually connect it to social studies, where students work in pairs or in groups and they look at art and they talk about, I teach 4th, 5th grade. I teach at the UCLA Community School. Yes. And we talk about what they see, what they wonder, and what they think. That's a resource that the Library of Congress shared with me. We also use, it's very open-ended. It's usually at the beginning of units when we're talking about the United States, like during 5th grade social studies curriculum. I give them images of what symbols the United States is associated with, like American pie, like all these different images. And then we talk about how the United States was constructed. It's a concept rather than just like this, country, right? So they kind of dialogue about that, and they talk about why certain images are associated with that and why certain images aren't. And it just comes from their own experiences.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate you sharing specifics for your classroom as well. All right, let's have one last contributor. Vanessa, good morning to you. How about you share with us?
Good morning. I've done something a little bit where my principal is cool. So she's just like, don't get us in trouble. Is I'll teach a lesson from the textbook and what the textbook says. And then I'll show them art that deals with the same topic, but is telling a completely different story, more of the reality of the story. And then I ask the kids, okay, what's the difference? And then little by little, they start, well, that one makes it look like they were happy. And that book isn't saying what the image is saying. And please excuse me, I have two 1.5-year-old German shepherds running around in the back. So I apologize for that. I'm like, but I'll do stuff like that with the kids where, okay, let's see what the textbook that our state has approved for me to teach you. And then I'll go into art. I teach both history and art. So at my school, we're a magnet school and we're allowed to teach 2 subjects there. And I have the honor of teaching 8th grade history and 8th grade art. So we'll go with what the one tiny little paragraph says, or what the image that they put there, displays. And then I'll go into the whole art, and I'll go into the Library of Congress, or simply I'll go into a Getty database and all that. And then the kids start seeing the difference. And by the end of the school year, they're realizing there's a lot more that could be explained through an image than just a textbook that we're told to use.
Thanks for sharing, Vanessa. Absolutely. Similarly to what Sylvia was saying, right, is including those multiple sources is so essential for students, and to position them as critical thinkers and interpreters of what is the historical narrative when we're engaged in our questioning around a particular period or moment in time. So thank you, everybody, for sharing what you're already doing. We are excited to be able to kind of provide you with, I think someone mentioned, Nancy mentioned the Library of Congress analysis tool. So she already previewed that a little bit. We're going to share that in a bit. And then many more ways to integrate art into the classroom. So I'm going to kick it over to Ben, and he's going to share our next activity.
Hi, everyone. So the focus of our day is going to be on murals. And one of the things that you were all asked to do is to research and prepare just a quick conversation on a mural in your local community. And I'm going to be sharing my screen in a little bit about a mural that reflects the community that I grew up in. And what we have here is a community mural from San Francisco. And the focus question here is on how does art tell the story of your community? And a little bit about me and San Francisco, where I grew up. This is a mural that's found on the side of Pingyun, which is a housing development in San Francisco. And this mural was painted by Daryl Marr in 1996 as a depiction of the vibrant Chinese community in San Francisco. And you can see in some of the detail here, not just the past, but also the present of Chinese Americans in San Francisco. And the thing to consider here is the history of the housing complex. Built from 1951 to 1956, this was the first attempt to alleviate some of the issues of dense urban housing in San Francisco, which at that time was labeled the worst slum in America. Now, by the 1970s, Pingyun had fallen into disrepair and was notorious for problems with crime and disease. There was a tuberculosis outbreak in the 1950s and a string of murders and gang-related activity in the 1970s. So here's the context. And one of the things to consider here was that as a mural, this serves as a form of resistance and resilience, not just as an art project, but telling a story that is not typically taught, because the mural itself is a reflection not just of this place being a locus of crime and disease, but also of the strength of the people there. So the portraits on the side of this building are of the residents. And one thing to consider here is the stories that are not told of hope that can be found in the people that live there. And the mural spoke to me as a kid because this is telling the story of not just where we are, but also more that the stories that that we see are not just what we see in the news, but more importantly, the stories that I count. And one of the things to also consider here is that street art is not going to be found in a museum. This is art for the masses and for the people to share their stories with all in the world. Now, that being said, I want us to consider in our breakout rooms, you're going to be introducing yourself with your partner, and you're going to share where you are from, and you can share a screenshot of a mural from your community and discuss the question, how does this tell a story? How does this mural tell a story in your community? So we're going to put you in breakout rooms in a quick minute.
Okay, I'm gonna open all rooms. Thank you, everyone.
And we'll see you back in the main room in about 15 minutes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I hope I hope that we didn't cut you off in the middle of a great conversation, but I did want to share an interview with the artist Daryl Marr about the painting, the mural that I was just talking about, and how he was working to reclaim and the story of the housing projects as not just an epicenter for crime and disease, but also one of community. And I'd like to have anyone want to come off mute and share out a mural that that they were talking about with their partners.
I'll share. My partner and I, or the one in the breakout room, we were talking about how our murals were a reflection of the community set in time, like Yaneli's mural was a mural in South LA about the jazz scene and how it represents part of history and how the community was formed. And even though the community has changed significantly, it's still there and it commemorates a time and a place because, you know, as we know, communities change all the time, especially like San Francisco, it continues to change. And even the murals, when I think about San Francisco, how they're changing now. As well as in my case, I focused on the UCLA murals on our campus. There's a bunch of murals on our campus now, and I focused on the ones in the secondary library around the breaking of the bread with Cesar Chavez and RFK by Baca, and how it reminds me that's a community too. Like a neighborhood's a community, a school is a community, and how it reminds us the values of the school and the values of why that school was created. Because so often as a teacher, I can get bogged down in a number of things, but having that there reminds me like, oh, that's right. This is what we're here to do, to, you know, support our community.
Yeah, that's awesome. In that communities are reflected with their artwork, and that the murals serve as a snapshot of a moment in time and can be used as a primary source for discussion. Like, what were the people thinking and feeling at the time this this artwork was created? So there's a lot to talk about. With that being said, we're going to shift gears here, and I'm going to pass it back to Nicole. And thank you so much for the great conversations.
All right, folks. Can everyone see my screen that says primary source analysis tool on it? All right, thank you. So we shared some murals, some images, and we're now going to really focus in on what types of questions, what types of ways might we consider or analyze these art forms that we've shared. And so I want to introduce you all, or maybe remind you all, or even just share an old friend, the Library of Congress primary source analysis tool here. It is linked in our agenda, so you can access it. And it's really the kind of centerpiece of the Teaching with Primary Sources program, which is to support students to engage in primary source analysis from an inquiry frame. And so this is a process that is kind of laid out step by step, and we're going to engage in it in that way. But for those of you who did have an opportunity to see Barbara Stripling's video, you know that she really highlights that this is a kind of ongoing process that allows students to really kind of ask questions, dig deeper, ask further questions. So I just want to highlight to you the kind of major components of this tool, which are observe, reflect, question, and then further investigation and additional notes. So it's really meant to be this kind of ongoing living document. And we are going to look at a mural, as Cindy said, a mural that was led by Judy Baca, among others, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history about that. And then we're going to engage in this process whole group. My thinking was we could use chat. So if folks could get their typing fingers ready, we're going to kind of individually look, engage in it, chat, and then reflect. So here we go. Okay. So we are going to take a look at the Great Wall of Los Angeles, also known as the History of California, which is a half-mile long mural depicting the history of California through images of significant figures and historic events from diverse and traditionally marginalized communities. And I have a kind of map here, a close-in map, and then a broader image of the mural itself. The mural is painted on the west wall of the Tujunga Flood Control Channel in North Hollywood area of the city of Los Angeles. And it was completed between 1974 and 1984 by teams of young people and artist supervisors. So Chicano muralist who we've just been talking about, Judith F. Baca, was working with the Social and Public Art Resource Center, or SPARC, which is where I got this information. They have a wonderful website. They were primarily responsible for the artistic vision and subject matter depicted in the mural. The Great Wall of Los Angeles is one of the largest murals in the world. It is 13.5 feet high, 2,754 feet long. We were just talking about how we might use math, right? So this might be something to do too, right? And geography, stretching over half a mile. The west wall of the channel functions as a canvas for the mural, and the murals are arranged in connected chronological segments depicting eras of California's history from prehistoric times through the 1960s. The scenes emphasize the role played by Native Americans, Latinos, particularly Chicanos, African Americans, Asian Americans, and Jewish Americans in creating California's culture. The Great Wall imagery highlights themes such as immigration, exploitation of people and land, women's rights, class distinctions, racism and racial equality, and the struggle for gay and lesbian rights. The artistic style reflects the Chicano mural movement of the 1970s and really highlights the previous works, which we can see as the Works Progress Administration and the Mexican muralists of the 1930s. Between 1974 and 1984, the wall was created and painted largely by local youth of varied ethnic backgrounds between the ages of 14 and 24. And these young people were engaged in the planning and execution of the mural through the Summer Youth Employment Program, and were supervised by professional artists who worked with them 4 to 8 hours a day. They received instruction in art, lectures in history. They engaged in improvisational theater, team building, all of this to kind of create these amazing murals. And the culminating mural is arranged in panels with the compositions that blend into each other, comprising of 6 sections with 86 titled segments, and the sections are usually organized by decade. Segments within each decade-specific section depict discrete historical events or important figures. We are going to take a look at one piece of this, but you can look at the majority of the wall from our links that are in the agenda. Okay. So we are going to look at this piece of the wall here, which is entitled, they're kind of labeled on the mural, Founders of Los Angeles, 1781, Mulatto and Mestizo Descent. And Amparo has dropped all sorts of wonderful resources here for us, and I know she's going to drop something about the history of Los Angeles founding in a moment. But before you do any background reading, let's just take a moment to observe. So I'm going to be quiet. I know I'm talking a lot. I'm going to be quiet and give you all a minute. But first, I want you to think about these questions. And these are framing questions from the Library of Congress. On their website, they also have these primary source analysis tools with framing questions. So I'm going to frame them. What do you notice first? What do you notice that you didn't expect? What did you notice that you can't explain? What do you notice now that you didn't earlier? So I'm going to be quiet. I would like you all just to notice, and then I'm going to give you all some time to write in chat. Okay, now this is my favorite part, is seeing what other people notice. Thank you, Amparo. So if folks could, just as Amparo modeled, could you please take a minute to just type in chat? What do you notice? What did you observe? And just go ahead and chat, and then type in chat, and I'll give us some time to read through everyone's responses. Okay, so folks are writing in here, and I'm going to give people a minute to just scroll through. What are people noticing? What are people observing? All right, folks, did anyone find any common themes that stood out to you? Or anything that someone else noticed that made you look at this a little bit differently? You can go ahead and unmute. We're a pretty small group, so you don't need to raise your hand. Just go ahead and unmute. So I'm noticing that folks are talking a lot about the animals, the size of the animals, the prominence of the animals. Then there's also folks talking about the people. Someone, and I can't remember who, mentioned their clothing, which I really appreciated because I didn't notice that they're wearing different clothing. I do notice that there's these kind of smaller scenes in the background, and someone mentioned that it doesn't look like it's being used for agriculture, right? We see kind of more of a use for the animals themselves. Anyone else want to share what they're noticing, what they heard from other folks?
I got to get, everything was going really fast, so I got to read one of them that says that the people do not look very happy, and they have an expression where they look angry, and I thought that was interesting.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry if we're going too fast. I definitely can give folks a little bit more time to read. So why don't we just take a minute to read what other people have written, and if anyone wants to share out what they saw other people noticing. I'm going to share out Marisa's noticing, which is the trail of packing animals across the top of the mural. I find that like really compelling too. That draws my attention, the kind of frame of it. And a lot of people are really kind of coming up with these idea of like what they think people's facial expressions are. So interesting. Anything else anyone else want to share before we move away from observing? Okay, I want to say, wow, gold star teachers for sticking to observing. It's so hard to not infer. And like everyone really did such a good job of observing what they see. So our next piece is reflection. How does this tell the story of Los Angeles? And Amparo, if you want to drop that in, that would be awesome. Why do you think somebody, I'm going to drop the questions I'm asking here into our chat too. And we're going to go through the same process. So why do you think somebody made this, or are, our muralists? Why do you think that the muralists made this? What do you think was happening when this was made? Who do you think the audience was for the image? And what can you learn from examining the image? So I'm going to be quiet and let you all look and reflect, and then we'll do the same process of writing in the chat. All right, folks, what's one thing that you noticed or observed that you think allows us to tell the story of Los Angeles? So I'm going to model this. I love those folks who highlighted the facial expressions, which makes me think that maybe this kind of like confrontational, this like looking the way that the three of the figures are like really looking right at me, the viewer, is to kind of highlight that the story of Los Angeles is about these people, right? It's not this kind of whitewashed history of Los Angeles, but it is about the mestizos and the Mexican settlers who came from Mexico, right, to settle in Los Angeles. So I see Sylvia and Ledwina, hopefully I'm saying that right, already put the reflections in. If folks could write their reflections, and then we'll take some time just to look and see, what did people say? How does this tell the story of Los Angeles? All right, so Sylvia says that the mural seems to communicate the relationship with the pobladores that had with the land, right? It's hard. It's a hard life working with agriculture and the importance of animals. That the founding story maybe shouldn't only include the story that we see in our textbooks. I know someone's already talked about that, right? About the Catholic and church mission system, right? Instead, it's trying to kind of really highlight the story of who really settled and founded Los Angeles. That Vanessa highlights that is made up, the LA is made up of indigenous and mixed race people. That's what Marisa said as well. Anyone else want to add what they see?
I would like to add that, I mentioned that they are wearing cowboy clothing because, the image that we have in our heads today about who is a cowboy doesn't really reflect what this mural shows us. So I see this mural as these are the original cowboys. These are the original people that, created the great economy of Los Angeles. That's how I see it.
Thank you. I'm going to add what Mandy put here too, right? Who was doing the building in these cities, right? Those are the people who are like really reflected in this image, right? The actual people who founded it. And Amparo, you're talking about the Blaxican story of LA. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I think when working with fourth graders in particular this last 2 years on Zoom, when we showed this mural and then pieces of the almanac that show that half of the founders of LA from the Spanish Mexico time were Blaxicans, right? They were Black and mestizo folks who were willing to come to LA. It really starts to sort of shift how they think of the history of the community, right? And also how they think about intercultural and diversity in terms of the founding of their own communities. And they ask a lot more questions. So it's kind of fun and it's exciting for them to think of that as well and to see connections across communities that have been there from some beginning. Obviously not when the Tongva were the ancestral caretakers of the land.
Anyone else want to add? Okay, I'm going to shift gears here and give us just a minute to think about what questions. Thank you everybody for sharing their reflections. What questions do you have about this image? And you can go ahead and type them in the chat. or just record them. Amparo, I had the same question. What brought them to Los Angeles, right? Oh, Aleda's asking about the creation of the mural, right? Totally different questions. All right, I invite you all to consider learning more about the mural. The Spark has a great overview of the mural. Judy Baca's website that's linked here also has a wonderful teaching presentation of the video that has videos embedded that have the students who created the mural talking about their experience doing it. It's like more of a kind of like actually how they physically were drawing the mural, which is super interesting. And then Amparo talked about the original settler, or shared the link with the original settler of Los Angeles. So there's more investigation that can be done. So I invite you to do that. I did want to share one final piece here. Is this elementary primary source analysis tool. We might want to add a little bit more focused framing for elementary students as they're engaging in this analysis. And this is our suggestion for that. So we've engaged in the kind of notice observation. What did you notice? What did you see? And then it really kind of asks them to think about audience and purpose. Why do you think somebody made this, right? And I know that a lot of folks really talked about that. And then what can you learn from examining this image, and what are you wondering about? And really using this, I know a lot of people talked about that the folks use this as like a inquiry, images as an inquiry starting off point, right? So I think we just modeled how we use this as a way to generate so many questions about the founding of Los Angeles that we could use as a way to kind of move forward in our lesson or unit around the founding of Los Angeles. So does anyone have any questions or thoughts or things that people want to share? Oh, and Amparo says she'd add, how does this help me understand my community today? Anything folks want to share or add?
I was just going to add, I think that I think that's why we all are attending this Zoom today, but I think it really gives students kind of insight into a time period where maybe we don't have oral histories to hear from the people and their story, that we can kind of see that reflected through artwork, and that's how powerful it is. So I really like having all of these like primary source analysis tools, but like that's, because we can kind of have this discussion of like, who are these people? Where did it come from? How does it reflect today? Where they can really understand and bring up all the questions that we're bringing up, like why did people come here? And we can kind of find those answers in books, but this really gives them kind of like a visual history that they're not going to get from text. So I think that that's how powerful it is to kind of use that artwork in those places.
Absolutely, thank you. And for students who are in that space to even talk about like that history is ongoing, right? We continue to discover, we continue to think about the voices of the people who are there, the kind of social history of a particular place, and that they might be interested in doing that in their own communities as well. What brought people there? Who are the people who are, coming to their community, and why, and the types of things that they're doing to make this their home. So we thank you everyone for sharing and for engaging in chat so thoughtfully. We are expecting our professor to come at 10:45, and I know we have still a lot of time together ahead. So I invite you all to take a break, to take a stretch. We will not do anything. You will not miss anything. We'll just be here kind of waiting for him to come and set up and come back at 10:45. All right. Thanks, everybody.
If you refresh, Nicole, there should be a slide with that information.
You're right. We had that all planned out. Thanks, Amparo. Welcome, Alberto. Thank you for your question. It was Tamara, right? So I don't see you anymore on your screen. So thank you for asking those questions. I appreciate it. I also don't know too much about founding of LA, so was right there with you. So we are about to start with our presentation from Professor Alberto Pulido. I have the honor of introducing him, and then we're going to get him set up with his presentation. Professor Alberto Lopez Pulido is the founding and current chair of Ethnic Studies at University of San Diego. He researches the relationship between Chicano community and culture. His dissertation focused on the American Catholic Church in San Diego, which also led him to examine a religious group in New Mexico. And currently he partners with numerous San Diego organizations, including the Chicano Park Steering Committee, which he's going to discuss today, the San Diego Lowrider Community, which led to the Digital Lowrider Archive, and ongoing projects that center and honor the knowledge and voices of San Diego community members. I'm so pleased to welcome him, and we'll turn over the presentation to him and share screen.
Great. Well, hi, everybody. Good morning. Hoping everybody's doing well. And are we starting now, or are we starting at 11?
We're starting now.
Oh, all righty. Well, let's rock and roll.
Welcome. We're glad to
you.
have you, Alberto.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can everyone see the screen with the presentation on it?
Yes, yes.
Alberto, can you see my screen too?
I sure can. Thank you.
All right. All right. You let me know how I should navigate.
Yeah, go ahead and push return a few more times so there can be some more stuff under my name. That's perfect. And so again, I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm in San Diego right now, and wherever you are, hoping all is good. It's summer, and so I'm having an opportunity to continue to do my work in the community, and I'm appreciating that very much. I have been asked to speak to you about the role of what we're calling resistance art and how it tells the stories of communities. And so I want to do that in a abbreviated time because we are limited, but I hope it sparks some ideas. And I hope that the conversation can continue beyond today. And in fact, Nicole and I have organized something that maybe we can get you interested in participating in, which we'll announce at the end of this presentation. So the history of Chicano Park and its monumental murals, the disruptive pillars of resistance. And I want to point out that in this title, we're talking about a real duality, which is so much a part of our communities of color, people who have been marginalized, having to deal with contradictions, having to deal with issues that sometimes don't make sense. And so what I want you to take away, I'm not really going to get into this, but I can later at another time, how these pillars that are the monumental murals of the park not only have been symbols of removal and symbols of erasure, but they now have been transformed into these symbols of resistance, and art has been at the center of that expression. So just to keep that in mind, because it's a much more complicated and longer discussion, but that was my reason in choosing that title, and it can come up later maybe in discussion. So if we could go to the next slide. So a little bit about me. I'm from San Diego. I grew up here. I consider myself a trans-border kid or transfronterizo. I lived a life both in San Diego. I grew up by the border, went to school by the border, but spent a lot of time in Tijuana and back and forth. And it was a world that was magical because there was not really the intensity that we see now after 9/11. and had family. My doctor was in Mexico, and it was just the life we grew up with. Bilingual, that whole reality. So that has had a big influence on me. And I left San Diego in the 80s to attend the University of Notre Dame, where I studied with Julian Zamora. I was one of his last students. And then I navigated education all over the country. And in 2002, the Catholics at the University of San Diego woke up to the need for diversity and inclusion. They were a little late by about 30 years, but they wanted to bring in ethnic studies. I applied for the gig and I was back home. And so I started this department. I'm very proud to say we now have 5 full-time faculty members. We're very active. We now have a diversity requirement, which has really blown up our program in a good way, and just doing a lot of good work. I also have a classroom on wheels by the name of Turning Wheel, and you can see it in the picture there. It's literally a 38-foot bus with images of the Chicano Park murals. I do all the work around the bus with the exception of driving it because I have crashed it before, so I'm not going to do that anymore. So now I have an actual driver, and that's interesting. And, you know, we go here in town to a lot of issues. The bus, I think, is a classroom, an art space. We've had presentations around gentrification. We've had community discussions. We're going up to Pomona in a few months to a lowrider car show. We're going to Santa Barbara to an event. And then we go to El Paso almost every year to their mini Chicano park that's out there. So if we have gas and we have an event to go to and I have a driver, we usually head out. And it's a long discussion, but I just want to introduce it to you. It's really changed the way I do my work, and just an interesting concept. You can find more online. If you look at the very last statement here above my email, I'm deeply committed to what I call a community epistemology. I'm very interested in questions of recovery work, meaning recovery work as it relates to history and stories that have been erased. And I'm very much invested in questions around healing and making us whole as a community, as a people. And just very important in terms of my own journey and in terms of how I see our youth right now really struggling with so many of these issues. And with that, then, I'm very invested in what's called the Chicano Park Steering Committee. I've been an active member for about 15 years. I am in charge of the tours. We have an emerging museum that will be opening in October. I'm the vice chair of that museum space. And I've just been elected to the San Diego Arts and Cultural Commission as a commissioner. And I've been told that's a big deal, so I guess I need to let people know that. I mean, I wasn't sure about that until I started getting all these emails. So at any rate, that's me, and just wanted you to get a better context. If you have any questions, there's my email address for future reference. Next slide. Okay. Here is what I have put forward as learning objectives. The first one is to learn the history of Chicano Park as activism and resistance, as I have been asked to present to you today. And having reviewed some of the documents that Nicole shared with me, I came up with another semi-learning objective here by blending a few of those documents, and that's to explore how to analyze primary sources as represented via art, and then to take into consideration expressions such as observation, reflection, questioning, analyzing, and putting the focus on people, on place, on objects, and on agency. And this gets a little bit layered because for our Zoom presentation, we're really only going to speak to the questions around people, place, and objects as they're embodied in the murals themselves. But if we were physically there, then I think this really opens up to so many other possibilities, because the place and the history of the place, the power of space, the power of community really comes out when you're physically present at the park. So you're getting sort of a modified version of that, but I'm sure you're understanding what the objective is here in terms of using this as a methodology or as a pedagogy. And I've learned so much from this, which has helped me in rethinking so much of what I want to share with you today. So I appreciate that. And then finally, that mural art needs to be seen as public art. And I always like to say that it's meant to educate us and it's meant to provoke us with thought and with action. I've given so many tours and I've had people from very radical, progressive walks of life, and I've had very, very conservative. And so I'm always very clear on this issue because some people will get offended with some of the discussions that come up, and they'll be taken aback that such a narrative could be present in a very conservative city like San Diego. And so I'm always checking that because we've had our issues of haters. We've been attacked by a group known as Patriots Fire here in San Diego. And so I'm always very vigilant about that and who's there, why are you here, what do you want? Because it's very much a part of our history and we're always sort of paying attention to that. Excellent. And just those images are murals at the park, important images. I think you can see the issues of resistance within them. And that image with the pillar that's in a fist is the work of Victor Ochoa, and one of the very first posters that was done for our annual celebration. And what I like is how he's taken the pillar and transformed it into a symbol of resistance, going back to what my title was attempting to convey to you. Great. Next slide. This is a really long discussion that I can't do justice to with the time that we have. But as I mentioned, this discussion can definitely continue. Some of you may already know this history. Some of you may know part of this history, but I really just want to touch on main points. And then if there's time for question or more elaboration at the end, by all means, let's have that discussion. You're looking at photographs here that take us back to 1970, probably April 22nd through about April 30th. And those of you who've never heard of Chicano Park or do not know its history, what makes it unique is that it is a literal land takeover. It's a community that had been fed up with the way they were being treated by the city of San Diego and the state of California. So as we say in Spanish, basta, we've had enough. We're going to take matters into our own hands and we're literally going to take over the space. Now, I doubt there would have been a lot of competition for that space because we're talking about nothing more elaborate than a underpass for a bridge. So I don't think it was prime real estate in the sense that it was a desirable space to be, but it was symbolic and very, very important to the community. I can't stress that enough. And why? Because you have a vibrant neighborhood known as Logan Heights, not Barrio Logan. Logan Heights is its original name. That's what the elders referred to it, and I'm out of respect for them, I'm always making reference to La Logan or Logan Heights. So much history there. Redlining produced a very multi-ethnic neighborhood. Many people don't understand that Logan was heavily African-American, Asian-American, Chicano, Mexican. A lot of people worked in the canneries. It was very, very cohesive. And in a weird way, the redlining created that. That changed in the 1950s. But then the devastation to the neighborhood was one, the creation of Interstate 5, and two, the building of the iconic Coronado Bay Bridge, which I'm sure people have seen on postcards and t-shirts, and it's like the big deal, right? And if you are on the west side, I'm sorry, if you're on the east side of that bridge, you're looking at Logan. If you're on the east side of that bridge, one, the bridge disappears. Two, you go to Coronado, which is affluence, leisure, green space, clean air. And, it's like, that's the place to be, right? Drinking your tambarino margaritas on the beach while you drive your little bike. And that's that reality. On our side, it's the opposite. And I'll go into that as we continue talking. So the pictures then are the actual land takeover. Ramon Chunky Sanchez wrote an incredible song where he speaks about, taking your picks and your shovels and moving the earth, planting. The picture here, can you see my pointer there? Does that pointer, can you see it on my end? I just want to point, okay, good, thank you. I want to point out this picture because it didn't come out very good, but this is a guy named Mario Solis, who was the person who really was behind the land takeover. And again, a long story, but this was equipment that was actually at the park when he was walking to college. He was walking to City College, and the construction crew was there because they were building the blacktop for a highway patrol station. So after all the debate and the arguing with the city over months, that was the culminating point that just blew it open. So Mario runs to City College, brings back his classmates. They're actually in a Chicano studies class, and the rest is history. They take over. As you see, Mario kicks off the construction workers. They take over the crew, the children planting, the massive pillars, because those pillars were speaking to a lot of the young artists as to how you could transform the space. And there's better pictures than this one. I have more in my bus, which I wasn't able to get, but you get a sense of what that looks like, meaning that you're living amongst those. Victor refers to them as this concrete jungle of cement trees, that are everywhere. And so it creates this very unique sort of space. I think that there's two very important takeaways here. One, between 1960 and 1973, 75% of the neighborhood disappears. You go from a neighborhood with 20,000 residents to 5 within that 10 years period. They either go south to Mexico, they go east to a very racist part of San Diego, or they just leave entirely. And I feel that the park was a symbolic way to bring people back together. They had been scattered and been separated, and they were saying, we want our community back. And so there's so many things to say about this, and you'd have to be there and really understand this. And the other thing that's so important is 52 years later, we are still here. Because if this would have been a one-year crazy idea of some young college kids and it didn't go anywhere, we wouldn't be talking about this, but it has survived. And it has survived because of the leadership, because of a very grassroots effort, not compromising with big business or with corporations, but really, really, I can't stress that enough. And it's one of the most important things that attracts me, spending my days in higher ed and just dealing with all that situation, coming to the community. It's real. It's a very lived experience, and it speaks to me. Chicano Park is La Tierra Mía, a very important narrative, the struggle for land and place. Note that this conversation gets more complicated when we talk about First Nations, because here we're talking about the Kumeyaay, we're talking about the Kumeyaay beyond the US-Mexico border. And we work with the Kumeyaay, but I think there's more dialogue that's needed in terms of understanding land and space and, what does this movement mean for Chicanos in relationship to indigenous stories? And that's like chapter 5. I mean, there's a lot more to be said about that. All righty, let's go on. So I'm going to invite you to do a reflection, and then I want to, in a minute, I want to have a video play, something I recorded. There's no sound, there's no voice, just simply an experience. Make sure you focus on the sonic, because that's very important to the park. And I'm not going to give you any context. This is part of what our exercise is for today. So as soon as I finish, I'm going to ask Nicole then to put on the next image, which is basically a video recording. It goes for about 4 minutes. And then if I can, you'll see this slide again. And I want you to really think about it, reflect on it, and then we're going to go into breakouts for about 5 minutes and then come back. And then we're going to do it again, but I'm going to have a different video. So that's kind of our task for the day. And I really want to invite you for this one to be mindful. I'm a big believer in contemplative education. I'm on a national board with a group called C-Mind. And you may or may not be familiar with this concept of sentipensante. Laura Rendon made that very famous in this country, but it actually goes all the way to a guy by the name of Orlando Fala Borda, who was watching Chilean fishermen work. And that then was made popular by Eduardo Galeano. And then it was picked up by Rendon. And it's a very simple concept, as you can see in the images. How do you connect el sentir con el pensar? How do you connect what you think with what you feel? And I'm sure I don't have to convince you that this is probably one of the least things we do in higher education or in education in general. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time with this, but I'm wanting to give you a little bit of the orientation that I'm trying to come from. And you can look at Rendon's work. I do a lot of this work in my own classes. I have my students create cajitas, which I see as sacred boxes, and they tell their stories. And I require students to go through a contemplative process in putting them together and telling their stories in an attempt to get at both the thinking and the feeling component of the person. So if you will be kind enough, just for this one, if you could put away those devices, you know, you're not going to get any text messages, you're not going to get any calls right now, because I really want you to, you know, kind of go into this space of mindfulness, clear your mind, don't worry about, you know, the meeting in an hour or what happened this morning. Let's just like be present. And I really want this to happen at the point that you witness this video as best as we can here in this virtual world. I put here, consider the 4 directions as you center yourself. I say that because we do that work at Chicano Park. Our work happens in a kiosco, and our kiosco has 4 components. And so whenever I do tours, I welcome people. I encourage them to consider this. And so here's the reflective questions. And as I mentioned, you're going to see this exact same slide when I finish. So I don't really want to say anything. I just want to let this play. Then Nicole, if you could just pop up the next slide once it's over, and then think of these questions if you want to write them down, and then we'll do some breakouts and then we'll come back. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. All right. So as you're watching this, what are you observing? What questions, thoughts? Can we just go back one more second? I just want to read those. Okay, what are you observing? What questions, thoughts, ideas, emotions arise within? What are the people, the place, objects, and agency teaching you? Okay, so again, video, you'll see the slide again, and then we'll do breakouts. Okay, sorry, thank you. So now we'll go into the breakouts.
Yes.
First one.
All right, everyone, you will be asked to join your breakout room, and we will be in breakout rooms 5 minutes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Amparo.
Thank you.
Welcome back. As I mentioned, I have a idea here, and what you're about to do next is very much tied to what you just went through. So if you have questions or there's still things that aren't making complete sense, I think when you see what I want to do for the second part, it'll come together. But having said that, and knowing that our group is small enough, can we get some thoughts, some reflections, ideas from folks for a few minutes, just to see where we're at and what you experienced, what you talked about? Would love to hear from folks if possible. Or if you don't want to talk and put something in the chat, you can do that.
Well, in our group, we talked about how exhausting the struggle is, and where do we find hope. And then we talked about women, and we know the history of the Chicano movement and some of the invisibility that women of color experience in that movement. So fortunately, that was my own projection, how we bring our own schema and experiences when we view something. So I tried to look at the mural, like I tried to forget everything that I know and I've experienced, to look at it with fresh eyes, but then how that also informs how we receive these images. But then how hopeful it is, like we're passing the baton, and we talked about how as teachers, maybe that's part of our contribution to the struggle. It's like coming together as, teachers that are interested in influencing our students and sharing these experiences with them, so that in that way we can contribute. So we might not be Anastasio, right? But we're carrying part of the movement that happened at Chicano Park.
Wonderful. That's very powerful. Thank you, Nancy. I'm just noticing that there are a few things in the chat. Nicolette writes iconography, heaven and hell, path of life. And then Sose writes, we were wondering if the painted skulls on the rocks were part of the original mural or were added by the people. No, they are part of the original mural. And you'll learn more about that. Yes, so they are. Mandy writes, we talked about the colors of the two pillars and one being seen more positive. Yes, that's perfect. You're going to see that right now. And we talked about the stones as skulls and whether the rocks represent the death of the communities as a freeway. Cool. Man, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Yes, the red pillar is definitely meaning something, and it's the opposite of what the blue pillar means. And then what we want to remember is Anastasio is in the center. So we're back to that whole question of the dualities, the contradictions, because this mural, I don't want to go too much into it, but this mural was controversial to the extent that artists were going to present something about someone that was killed. And that created a lot of conversation. And the artists figured out a way to find the connection by that duality. So I feel like I'm giving a lecture again, so I'm gonna shut up. But anyway, that's where we're at. Yeah, Tamara.
I'm gonna risk some vulnerability here, and say I live up in Washington, so I don't have the history of the place.
Right.
And I've been there and it's amazing, but I always stand there overwhelmed and don't even know where to begin. Like, who are these people? What do they represent? The art isn't my style. So you're dealing with your little judgmental white voice in your head going, shut up, listen and just engage this. But I don't know what I'm looking at. And I wonder if students feel that and how you can help then bring them in and bring it down small enough so they can feel like they can touch this art and observe something in a small piece and feel a success in this instead of just this overwhelming, I don't know what to do, none of this makes sense to me. How do you help students and teachers encounter something that's new to them and break them out into this learning mode instead of a shut down, I don't know what I'm doing mode?
Yeah, I'm sure that other people here would have opinions on that because you have experience like I do. But my immediate reaction is we're going to do that today because we're only focusing on one mural. So you just got this sort of unexplained vision, and what you're about to see is an explanation, and not by me, but by the artist. So that would be one thing. If you want real, like hands-on, practical things, I have been sort of a guide with my students to produce a catalog of the murals. We've done 2. They're now outdated. So keeping my fingers crossed that we'll have a 3rd volume coming out by the end of the summer. And that would not only be a volume that's a hard copy, which is what I'm used to, but with these youngsters, they want to go virtual. So then that would be an idea. You're going to notice with the Anastasio mural, it is the only mural at the park that has a QR code. So that would be another way with the younger generation to snap that QR and learn about this. This mural is also probably one of the few murals that has so much teaching tools that you can find online for it, because it's really took over at so many levels. So that would be my thought. And I think I wouldn't be afraid of feeling overwhelmed because this is a living park. In other words, this isn't frozen in time. So the knowledge and the thinking is always changing. So for me to give you that package of, you know, it's this or it's that, I don't think that's possible. I could go to the park today and something else could happen. We have so many things going on. And I think one of the perspective is, how do we look at this as a lived experience and not something that is like frozen in time, but that it continues, and that history and that legacy and that struggle, as Nancy was referring to, I think is a big, big part of it. And I hope that makes sense. So I see real positive things in the confusion. I mean, that makes sense to me. Anyway, any other thoughts on that? I'm just speaking on my behalf, but I'm sure other people have opinions.
What Amparo put in this comments, that this feels familiar and museums feel unfamiliar.
Yes.
And it kind of connects to what you were just saying right now. When your murals are community, you're part of it, you're engaging with it, you live with it every day. And when you go into a museum, you know, you still feel that emotion, you connect with the art, but you're more of an observer rather than with a mural. I feel like you're more of a participant observer, that you're part of that community, whereas in a museum, maybe you don't feel that connection.
Thank you. And I would also say that we consider Chicano Park being an outdoor museum. And we have 108 pieces to share. Some of them are amazing, some of them are, but that's the space. And, you know, there's even a process where we've gotten money for restoration. And so what you remember as the mural like 10 years ago has been completely transformed. So then you go and get mad at the artist, and what they're going to tell you is that that mural wasn't finished. I finished it 10 years ago, but now I'm continuing it. And then 10 years later, I'm going to change it again. So that's really kind of cool. There's this real fluidity, you know, around how we understand space. And our community is being taken over by gentrifiers. So that's another issue right now, you know, that it's real. And how do you deal with that? And how do you work that through? So anyway, it's just making me think about those issues.
I just wanted to say too that my grandfather's middle name is Anastasio.
Oh, wow.
And it made me feel emotional, you know, to that end. And it made me think of him and just how struggles in life, and it's about a journey. And then I had we were talking about the woman there was an image of a woman that looked like she was encased in a clear box, and one of the members in my group brought up that maybe it was ice and she was frozen in time. And
Yes.
I found that to be very interesting, a very interesting image.
That is accurate. I had a teacher the other day, which I thought was kind of cool. They referred to the cages and the spaces that they put the children in as hieleras, which are refrigerators. So that's another way of looking at it. That was kind of interesting. But see, this is how you learn, because people engage you. If I'm sitting in my office, figuring this out, no, you got to get out there and talk, and people definitely. So yes, very good. How about one last comment, or else we can go to part 2. All good? Okay, next slide then. Thank you for all your input. We're gonna do the same thing now, but you're gonna have a different context. So same thing, but now the mindful reflection is with narrative and context. This is a much longer piece. This was produced by the Sherman Heights Community Center and a human rights organization here in San Diego. And you just see the exact same thing, same drill, but this time you're gonna hear from the people, from the artists. It's about a 10-minute piece. And then we're gonna put up this and we're gonna go back into the breakouts and then see where people are at. So next slide, and please play.
This mural came to be from direct invitation from Christian Ramirez. There was the director of the American Friends Service Committee at that time. We're dedicating it to Anastasio. He has been murdered by these immigration agents.
The way that this mural was designed was with 2 components in mind, a healing side and more of a destructive side. So this side is the healing side, and there are more cool blue tones. There's teals and greens, very much representative of the earth.
We call this the water pillar, and that one is the fire pillar. We view water, I think, traditionally as cleansing, as healing, and that energy of that flow of water serves that purpose on this mural.
We have at the bottom, anchoring the healing side, is a healing circle of women, and they're burning copal. So traditionally, copal is used in pre-Columbian ceremonies because that is what our ancestors are attracted to.
This piece has to do with what precipitated the actual beating of Anastasio Hernandez Rojas. When he was apprehended, my understanding is that he was told to drop the water bottle. And with his limited English, he thought they meant to empty the water bottle and began to empty it. The border agents used that as an excuse, viewing it as some sort of resisting arrest or something, and began to beat him at that point. He was subsequently handcuffed and on the ground when they began to kick him and tase him, and he was sent to the hospital. 2 days later, he died of his wounds, of his beating. We start with this bottle of water merging with the Rio Bravo or Rio Grande. That leads you to another very tragic scene, which is the scene of the father and daughter who drowned in the Rio Bravo a few months ago and were found there in the bushes.
The image of the father and the little girl that drowned, that was some image that popped up when we were in class last summer. And we really battled very hard with that image because it was so graphic and it was so powerful, and we would cry and we would argue like, no, we won't want it on there. No, we don't think, it's too painful. And we finally decided to put it in there. It's so powerful to me that they're face down, because they could be any ethnic group. You can't tell who they are. And to me, you can put anybody there. You can put anybody's face there, because it's happened so much.
This side represents more of the struggle. It also represents death. We have images of children who have been killed in Border Patrol custody, as well as images of hands that have been zip tied together as someone who's been in Border Patrol custody or police custody. At the very top of the pillar, two things you'll see is, one, you'll see the scene captured on camera of Anastasio's beating, the tasering, and then what led to his death. But you also see images of children up there and a sign that reads, Futuro sin miedo, future without fear. So just as fire kind of consumes things, destroys things, it also leads to what we have on the other side, which is growth from struggle and growth from death.
The piece that is behind us here is the oldest son of Maria and Anastasio. His name is Fabian. Fabian, since his father was murdered, has not been able to leave his house. And so the only time he leaves is when he's accompanied by his mother. For us, like being out here and doing this joyously, I had to always remember this is not happiness for them. This is their tragedy. And it's in display like to the whole world what happened to them. So always being very respectful about how we address Maria, asking her permission, taking her into account anytime there was something that needed to be said, was like, for me, that was huge, huge for me, to make sure that she was blessing what was happening here. To me, I wanted to do something that was healing for her and for her children. I believe that everybody that's here was called for a specific reason.
One of the things we wanted to make sure to make very prominent in this mural was not only the harsh, tragic scenes, but how do we heal from that?
Art has a healing element to it. We talk about the idea of catharsis. As we get up to the top and we finally worked in the scene of Anastasio's death, it's really taken a lot of digestive work, emotional digestion of the story, how we want to portray it, so that the history and the context is not lost. The 12 officers tased, beat, kicked, stripped him of his clothes, and others just stood by and watched and let it happen. But as artists, we also wanted to provide this for the family as a place, as an altar, a memorial. And I think we've really come to it the right way in handling it with sensitivity and showing the truth, but also letting the dignity of Anastasio really shine as it does with his portrait in the center.
He represents a light to help us understand this issue as it continues to happen, because there's still people being killed on a regular basis, raped, children in cages, still there. All of these issues are still going on.
I believe we're part of a global community. I believe in working without borders, building bridges. This act of rebellion, this act of struggle, of crossing the border, it speaks to more of a joint human struggle that I think speaks across borders, at least I hope so.
We need to work harder We need to stand with our brothers and sisters, remember where we came from, because we can't continue doing this to people anymore. It's destroyed all of their lives, all of them.
I invited the students to go meet the widow at the park, and that was the third level of where the students met Maria, and they got the emotional, spiritual contact from her. And all these people that were there, and there was tears going on. And I looked at everybody, everybody that was sitting there on the park bench, and I said, "All right,
Sorry, all technical difficulties there. Let me bring us back to our prompts.
That's actually a nice addition. And you see there's more you can draw from. Just let's this is a very, very challenging video to watch. And so just gather your thoughts, and we'll do one more breakout, and then we will see you in a few minutes. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. I just want to start by saying that I think I've seen that piece over 30 times, and for some reason today it just really, really hit me. Would love to hear your thoughts, reflections, maybe even thinking about how we started this and then what do we have now. One last thing is, I think a lot about recovery, because now that there is a context provided, then the history is not erased, and you can connect it with this image and this creative project that speaks to us in very powerful ways. Anyway, would love to hear from somebody. If you want to put something in the chat, if you want to share what you folks discussed, we appreciate that very much.
I want to agree with you, Alberto. This was very emotional. And I really love how the artists were respectful of Maria and her, her family story. And one of the other women in the group in my breakout room was talking about how, making that connection to how really common this is, from Rodney King to George Floyd to just, we observe death before our eyes at the hands of police brutality. And it's heart-wrenching. But what was really beautiful is just that duality of the pain of that, and then the healing element of it. And I was struck by the passion and the emotion of the artists as well. So that was pretty amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nancy shared, grateful for the artists who are attempting to be healers in their community, how social justice teachers like ourselves, we can be healers to the communities for our students who don't understand the cruelty of the world. We can heal through our teaching and hope. That's very, very good. If I may just add, one of my favorite essays that I assign almost every semester is written by Levin Morales, Aurora Levin Morales, and you can find it online. And the name of the piece is called Historian as Curandera. And her argument is all about how do we resurrect or how do we uncover or unearth our stories that have been erased or that have been made invisible for a path to make us whole so that we can learn more of our story. And it's a beautiful piece. She's Puerto Rican and Jewish, and she talks about remedios, or, you know, I don't know what the right definition, it's not recipes, but I guess it's like form. I don't know what the word for remedios is. Anyway, how do
Remedy.
Remedies, yeah, thank you, yeah. Remedies to heal, and the remedy is one that's related directly to the power of story. So it just resonates with me, and I think appreciate that, your comments there, Nancy.
Can I say something, Mr.
Yeah.
Pulido?
Yes, you can, and call me Alberto.
Okay.
I'm already
Albert-
old.
Professor. One of the issues that I had this year when I teach more real history, I don't know how to describe it, but I have a lot of my kids asking me at the end of these lessons that are very powerful like this, is the United States a bad country? Are we bad people? And so I told them, I cannot answer that question for you. You're gonna have to answer that on your own. But I feel like, is there, based on your opinion, what else can I do for my students who ask that question?
Wow. Well, again, I'm sure all the other teachers would have an opinion, but since you're asking me, here's how I deal with that. You know, in my understanding and the way I want to approach what we call ethnic studies, or even Chicano studies or Chicana studies, or I guess now Chicanx studies. We talk a lot about the power of story, so which was what these students are reacting to, but that we're always hearing what we call the master narrative, the narrative that we all know. And what has happened over the past, ever since the killing of George Floyd, I feel, we now have different stories, as we call them counter narratives. So the way I would respond to your students is I think they need to know both.
Okay.
And it's not to say that now that you know this other story, the first one isn't accurate. It's that how do you then find justice in that whole process? Okay. And let them figure it out, because that's what I do.
Okay.
And it ends up being that the accurate story are the ones that we are telling, you know, but this has become very politicized, and now with ethnic studies as being part of the curriculum, you know, I just see it's the whole politicalization of it to me is really problematic. But let me not go into that, because that's another talk.
Well, no, and this is why maybe I should, you know, ask everyone, because this is one of the issues with teaching ethnic studies, you know. So they feel, many people feel that we're only teaching the ugly, and we're not being, you know, fair to the history of the United States. So that we are going to continue to encounter this type of things. So I think that it's a very good question to give to the group, and so we can start thinking about what kind of responses can we give our students. So far I have told this exactly the same thing as you did. I said, well, I have offer you not the narrative but the lessons, and based on that, what do you think? And I give it back to them, and I says, what do you think? And that's a question that only you can answer, I tell them, and I refuse to answer that for them.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, let me just one last thing, and then we can move on. When I think about what happened to Anastasio, okay, the truth is that he was killed. There's no way around that, okay? And he was killed by Border Patrol agents. So that's the truth. Now, how you unpack that, or your reaction to that, especially if you're there looking at the mural, you have to unpack that and look at all those different ways of understanding this, you know. I mean, why did they remove his clothing? you know. There was a, I don't remember the name of it, but this hit the paper about a month ago. There was a sort of a sub border patrol group that comes in and cleans up situations whenever there's any sort of death. And this got before Congress, and then Homeland Security has removed that group. No discussion. And so in the case of Anastasio, this was in an area called El Chaparral, which is right on the border, and there were a lot of people there, so they were filming. Just like in the case of Rodney King, and so okay, one lady left, and therefore then when they went to get phones and clean them, she didn't get picked up because she was gone, and that's how this video, which is caught in that picture, became public. So anyway, okay, let's go on. We talked about how powerful the video was, especially to those of us who were unfamiliar before. The room talked about how beautiful the idea of growth and healing from it, how the artists tell a story of history. Yes, very true. Our group talked about how to connect these current injustices against people with the history of how the US wealth was built. How is this a pattern? How can we heal and make our society more fair and humane? Yes, thank you, Sylvia. And then Amparo, how do our students see themselves as curanderos of the history, and how do they reimagine our nation so that those bad things do not happen again? And how do our, okay, so that's replicated there. Great. Any other thoughts? As you can see, there's so many interesting ways of going with this and so many things, and definitely longer conversation is merited. So again, I hope that this dialogue can continue. I failed to mention that the Anastasio mural is the tallest mural at Chicano Park. It is 7 stories high. It is the only mural that went beyond the pillar. So if you look carefully, it's actually on the bridge itself, meaning the road. That's going to have its possible consequences because we get a lot of leakage. That neighborhood has no drainage system. We get a lot of leakage, and therefore things start to get damaged. But they were convinced that they needed to paint beyond that. You know, so there's these technical questions and issues around the art itself. And so that's kind of fascinating. The mural was done during COVID, and I went out there and visited it several times. I'm thinking that it probably took over a year because they were shutting it down and then they were coming back. And I can't say enough about the main artist, who I like to call El Maestro Victor Ochoa, who's been painting for, God, his entire life. Has an international reputation, but always comes back to the park. So just to mention that. All righty, so let's move on. Next slide, please. Thank you for all your input. So as we wind down here and as we give you this sort of introduction, I'd like to just open it up again for some more discussion. And by the way, what you're seeing in those slides is the most recent mural that is actually still being completed. And we're expecting it to be unveiled, I think the 25th of June, if that's a weekend. And this is a mural dedicated to a lowrider car club by the name of Brown Image. It is the only mural that I know of anywhere in the world that is painted with automobile paint. Okay, so what they did is they bought gallons and gallons of a gold metallic flake paint that you would paint a lowrider car with. And everybody thought Victor was nuts. And he figured out that if you primer the pillar, then the paint will stick. And so you don't really get a good sense of it. Maybe the second image gives you a little bit of that. And then everything was airbrushed and that is a technique that Victor really mastered, because a lot of the murals are of course done with a paintbrush, but he did a mural on the Mexican Revolution, giving it that really unique look like you would see in an old negative. And that's why he decided to go with the airbrush, and he liked it so much that then he's been doing it in other murals. And in this one, the paint in the airbrush is the paint you would use to detail a lowrider car. It is a root beer, candy, apple sort of brown, and the entire mural is gold flake with that other color, which is usually used to do the pinstriping and the lining. They do it in the mural. So this is an incredible piece. It's still scaffold, but I think scaffolding should be coming down in a few weeks, and so something to check out. Yeah, cool. All right, very good. Thank you for that note, Amparo. So again, let me, as we try to wind down here, let me see if anybody has thoughts on this. Any entry point would be fine with regards to these questions. What have we learned about Chicano Park in relationship to activism and resistance? What are your takeaways? How has your understanding of mural art as a primary research tool been modified, or as a primary research area? And then how might you incorporate this presentation into your own teaching? So would love some feedback, would love some conversation. Again, if you'd rather not speak, feel free to put something in the chat. Any thoughts, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad not to be part of not teaching history. My approach is more literature. I was born in Mexico, so I'm teaching Spanish as foreign language to juniors and seniors. And I'm glad because I'm learning a lot from the entire presentation, but also because I can see the connections that I can do between my literature class, and the sections or the lesson plans where I use the art. Murals, of course, I need to cover muralism as a part of one of the subjects related with art, but I wasn't aware, to be honest, I wasn't aware of this wall. And for me, the entire session is absolutely incredible. And I'm so thankful for this type of initiative through the University of California, because there is a world to share with the students. My personal takeaway is how the murals show the struggles and the hope of different type of community, or a portion of one community, and how they reflect the human struggles, not only related with one specific minority. I don't want to talk about only the Hispanic minority or the Black minority, but how you can, as a teacher, you have the responsibility to look for that type of those type of human connections, instead of talking about just one single portion of the community. At least that is my approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Susana. Muchas gracias.
Sure, no problem. Gracias.
If I can just say a few thoughts, I think the role of literature is so critically important. And again, allow me to be a teacher for a second here. We have an incredible mural in honor of a guy named Pedro J. Gonzalez. And Pedro J. Okay, you know Pedro. Okay, so you know his story. And there's a film, and there's music. And all I'm getting at is you could use our mural. It's one pillar, and teach all about Pedro. And just want to point that out. When I would speak to the universality of our humanity, I would, because I always like to end anytime I give a tour with a mural by a guy named Juanishi, who's from Sacramento. He's part of a very important art collective called the Royal Chicano Air Force that's very famous. And we had the honor of having them come years ago and do 4 murals. But he has a very important mural entitled En la Quech, which is a Mayan concept. En la Quech quiere decir en español, tú eres mi otro yo. And so there's a whole history around that. And so I just throwing that out there because then that would be another way for you to enter with your students.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Professor, could you please repeat again the 2 names that you give me? I know that you mentioned Pedro.
Pedro J. Gonzalez, and then En la Quech, or if you just look up, tú eres mi otro yo. En la Quech is a Mayan term. And in English, we say, you are my other me. And Luis Valdez took that concept and used it as a way to teach. In fact, it was supposed to be part of the ethnic studies curriculum, but it was removed. And at Tucson Unified, in their ethnic studies program, they always begin their classes with a recitation of En la Quech, tú eres mi otro yo. And we can talk about that. I think we have some links here. Cool. All right. We have another, thank you so much. So we have another statement from Joseph. He says, just absorbing a lot of the conversations. I'm in gentrifying Highland Park. There are mural wars. Wow. And my students are aware of it. Lots here, and I will borrow for lessons on identity. Joseph, can you tell us a little bit about what does a mural war mean? What is that?
Yeah, so there are several, can you hear me too?
Sure.
Yeah, there are several murals here, definitely very like Latino centered, celebrating their culture and lots of goodies. But whenever like a pastry shop comes in or a record shop comes in, they whitewash over that and put up their own mural and stuff. So it's been in the LA Times and a couple other places, and
to check that out.
It's people feel like we're being pushed out.
Right. And what are the themes of the murals that the businesses are doing?
There's one on Cesar Chavez. There's one that's very Aztec in nature. There's one Chumash. It's I don't know. These are the things in the neighborhood. There's one that never gets messed with, but that building is now up for sale. So people are like, what's going to happen? So.
Well, thank you. What always comes up in my presentations, especially people who aren't from the community, is do these murals get tagged? I always find that interesting because it's always asked. Like we're all walking around with spray paint. And so I always tell them that no, the murals do not get tagged. The murals do have what's called graffiti guard, or they have other names for it, but it's basically a clear coverage that then if something were to happen, that easily would come off. But what is very fascinating to me, and you just made me think of this, Joseph, is our bathrooms are tagged. I mean, heavy duty. The bathroom looks like the Sixtine Chapel. It's incredible. And the city comes in, paints over it, and then boom, it gets hit within. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's just a very interesting issue. There's also an older artist who's now been doing murals in the bathroom, and they're around lowrider cars. And so like, I'm starting to reflect, okay, can we incorporate this now as part of this? But you got to be very careful here because there's some real serious challenges and issues in the neighborhood because the freeway divided the community. So we have some real issues. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. Liz, is it Liz? A takeaway, I've always done mural surveys looking at lots of murals. I love the idea of diving deep into one mural, looking closely for details and learning stories behind the details. Great, well, thank you for that. Aledaida, before today's session, I felt that murals were too intimidating since they didn't teach art, but after today's session, I feel that my students and I can greatly benefit in sharing our views about the great lessons that these murals can teach us all. Great, that's good to know, thank you. I appreciate that. Nicole, of course, we want to have you present longer, but I'm sorry, we need to wrap up. Yes, we will wrap up. Okay, any last minute things that people are wishing to say? If not, we have another invite. You have my email, and I'm assuming all of you are nearby, so we're not too far away. Look for our turning wheel bus or come down to Chicano Park. And with that, then let's end with our last invite here. And in speaking with Nicole, we are going to host folks at Chicano Park on July 22nd at 11:30. And can you tell us more about that, Nicole?
Yes, as Alberto and I were planning for today, well, number one, I want to say thank you to Alberto. Thank you, thank you. Let's get our applause out. Hand, you can show your applause, emoji. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As my note said, obviously we want to spend all day talking about this. And this was just, this was a focus on one piece of this amazing park. And as I see it, it's just the kind of start of the conversation. And I believe Alberto sees it the same way. And so we really wanted to continue this and invite you to the park itself. We have it linked in our agenda, and we'll drop the link to, okay, Amparo just dropped it there too. We invite you to please come on the 22nd at 11:30. It's for those of you who are not San Diegans, it's in central San Diego, but it is worth the drive. I know Los Angelinos are very willing to drive, and I know there's a lot of you in the group here. So please, please come. And Alberto's generously going to lead us through a walking tour of the park itself.
Awesome. So again, in the interim, if anybody has any questions as to the logistics around that, I can help on my end. I give probably, I don't know, in the summer, maybe 10 to 20 tours a week. I mean, not a week, a month. And very, very cool. So would really welcome you here. And if that date doesn't work, just there's always something going on. I want to kind of end with tribute to our park and the really short little video to give you more context here. And this is in honor of our 50th year celebration. Every year, except for the past 2 years, we have a celebration that is the day of the park takeover, usually April 22nd, but it's always the third Saturday of April. And remember, April 22nd, 1970 is also the very first Earth Day. So for many people, Chicano Park represents also the one and only green space in the neighborhood. So anyway, we'll leave you with this, and it's just a short piece, but you get a better sense of how we do what we do and some very important people in here that are part of our struggle. So, okay, let's go. I think it died. Okay, well, anyway.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all good. You can see it at another point. No worries. Just thanks again and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alberto. So join us, please, in July for the walking tour. And we'll be excited to reunite at that time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Ciao.
Bye.
Adios.
All righty. We have 10 minutes. So why don't we take a less than 1 minute move around if you need to. And then I'm going to send the screen over to Ben to talk briefly about how we might integrate this into the classroom. Go ahead, Monica.
I just have a quick question. Danny, did you present at CCS conference about incorporating LGBTQ plus history into the classroom? Did you do that presentation a few years back?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Because I want to thank you, because that inspired me to incorporate a lot more LGBTQ history. And you had recommended to do it in an organic manner, that not just like, oh, let's do one specific unit, but whenever you can weave it in its historical time frame, to do so. And I've been doing that, and I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank everyone here for today, because I was actually planning on visiting Chicano Park. I'll be there next week. And when this email came in about this opportunity, I thought, first of all, I would have done this anyway, because I love this topic, but now I'm even more inspired. So thank you so much to all of you. You make a great impact on all of us as classroom teachers. And this is how I really believe art and education is how we're going to change the world. And thank you for everything you do to everyone. So have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.
Folks, we are not done yet. If you could please hold
we have
on. Please, thank you. Ben has a couple of things and a call. Sorry if Monica had to leave. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so a couple of things to consider here as we make that transition into resources for teaching. I want to thank you, Monica, for highlighting some of the past work that the California History Social Science Project has done as it relates to resources and materials that you can bring directly into your classroom. And we're going to do some more of that right here with what I'm about to share with all of us. So in our work with murals, we want to consider how we can teach something that is so big and break it down into some small bite-sized pieces for our students. And one thing to consider here would be a resource that's linked in the agenda, which is the Camilo Vergara archive in the Library of Congress. So Camilo Vergara is a photographer, MacArthur Genius Grant winner, and he documents murals from across the country. And an activity that I wanted to share with all of us today was the Crop It activity from Facing History. And I'm not going to talk through all of the slides here with how to actually crop a photo in Google Docs, but this is borrowed from Facing History and ourselves, and they have the resources linked in our agenda right there. But what we're doing with the Crop It activity is to guide our students through 3 reads of an image, and it doesn't have to be a mural. But through these 3 reads of an image, you're able to identify the larger meaning and then make meaning of it with your students. And that's part of it. We're going to get time to explore. And unfortunately, due to our time constraints, I was going to model this with all of us, where we go through the image, we look at the focal points, and then we look at some tension that is borne out in the mural. We have another mural here from the same Vergara collection, but this one is a little bit harder to read. So my recommendation here is to find some context, because that was brought up earlier in the discussion, and it's important to find just one thing that you can focus on with your students after you've done your Crop It activity. And when you bring it all back in the inquiry, you need to help the students make meaning. And this is one of the historical thinking skills, where you're making those connections as it relates to context. How do you contextualize this? How do you connect the mural to what's happened in the past, to what's happening in the present, and even in the future? And this is also on the agenda, but we have a list of some links that you can consider. We have 2 links from the Library of Congress, with not just the Vergara collection, but another photographer, Carol Highsmith. Her work is more from the early 20th century and mid-century of America. So again, take a look at those 2 collections from the Library of Congress. There's thousands, literally thousands of murals to choose from, but you can use the helpful filters on the Library of Congress, not just by geographic area, but also by theme. Google Street Art also has a cool searchable database, and also links to different organizations that provide that that context that we're talking about. And Cowsphere is another great resource. And there I found an archive of murals from elementary schools. So these are murals done at elementary schools, and you can find some common thematic elements there to share out with your students. And that's all I have in terms of plugging resources. Again, I'm going to tack this on as homework. I know teachers hate it, but I couldn't finish this in the time allotted, so you're going to have to do this for homework. So please, please review. And just two questions that I want to leave us with before I transition this over to Nicole is, how do we express our experiences through art, and how does art invite a community to express or reclaim its narrative? Going back to the mural that I had shared from San Francisco earlier, how the mural was meant to reclaim and add a counter narrative to a housing development that was seen as a center for crime and disease, how that changes that to a community of hope. That can be done throughout different things as well. But thinking about the artwork that we saw from Chicano Park, and maybe something that you find in your research through any of the sources that I'm linking also in our agenda. But again, big questions to think about, and I feel like I'm rushing through this. So I'll take a moment to pause as we take any questions or comments, or no, I see a head shaking. We're gonna move on. So that being said, Nicole, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and you can just tell me and I'll advance through the slides.
I'm like so excited about Alberto's presentation. I'm San Diegan myself, and you know, I love my LA people, but there's always so much to focus on LA. So it was so fun to be able to focus on Chicano Park for so long. And I really do hope that you all will come down here or explore a new part of your neighborhood, or for those of you who are San Diegans, to kind of deepen your knowledge. I wanted to spend some time sharing this resource with the elementary folks. Maybe Something Beautiful is also a story about San Diego murals in the East Village. I'm going to turn this into something that's asynchronous that I'll email out to everybody so you can have that. But I will say that it's a story of the creation of murals in another part of San Diego that's very much from the perspective of a little girl that I think is inspiring. And there's quite a bit of support for teaching around this particular book, and with the lesson plan, and then this amazing, I guess it's kind of like a reading of the book, storytelling of the book with the music, and kind of like a theater as well. So that I will share with you all. I do want to now have to shift gears to administrative tasks and items for our last minute. I know that we will offer UCI extension credit, which is of interest to many folks. That's 2 quarter units. It will require you to participate in all of our synchronous and asynchronous components of the workshop because it's based on 20 hours of your time. And to turn in an inquiry-based lesson by June 23rd, which we will talk in more detail about tomorrow and the next day. And all of this information you can email me, and or we're going to drop a link, and it's in the agenda about the process. For those of you who have engaged in the process before, I'm looking at you, Vanessa. This is much easier and streamlined this year. So I invite you all to consider doing this if you would like to get some units. We also have homework, as was mentioned. There is a brief video from the Library of Congress. We have created a Library of Congress scavenger hunt because this Library of Congress can be really challenging to navigate, and we want to be able to show you how to access the items that are created specifically for teachers, and the many resources there. There's also been, we'll share, we have the CROPA activity and then maybe Something Beautiful. If you have time, please take a look at that, or you have all summer to look at these items. And most importantly, to prepare for tomorrow, if you could, create a mixtape of songs of resistance centered on a topic or time period you plan on teaching in the coming school year. So that will include a list of songs that you just kind of bring in. You can bring it on your Post-it or however you want to bring that in, and we'll kind of talk about that as a whole group starting tomorrow. So does anyone have any questions about any of all of that we just talked about in our speed talking? So we would just love to leave you with this closing reflection to kind of think of through the day, and we'll kind of frame us as we continue on. So how have communities expressed their hopes, joys, dreams, and needs in and for community spaces? So we hope that that's a kind of a nice framing for us to continue to think about how important Alberto's talk was for us, all the murals that you all brought in to share about your own communities, and as we move forward, kind of thinking about music as a vehicle for expressing all of these different hopes and aspirations for ourselves and our community. So I'm going to stop sharing. I've taken 2 extra minutes of your time. I thank everybody for being part of today, asking your questions, sharing your ideas and breakouts, and we are very much looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll be here for a few minutes if you have any questions. Otherwise, the Zoom links in the agenda, 9:30. Come with your mixtape songs.
Yes.